Obviously, this is a follow-up video to my video yesterday about Sega apparently buying Rovio Entertainment, who are the makers of Angry Birds. And basically, I just wanted to go through and basically explain why the deal makes sense and why the deal is logical for Sega and Rovio in both ways, and why it's about more than just, the future of Angry Birds and the future of Sega, but also the future of gaming in general, and how this is actually what Sega has done for many, many years. Now, we're looking at obviously the Rovio website. Rovio obviously, if you go straight on the games section, there's straight up with Angry Birds showing you Angry Birds games like Angry Birds Journey, Angry Birds Classics, or Rovio Classics Angry Birds, which you can no longer purchase on Android, but obviously you can get it on iOS as Red's First Flight. They rebranded it due to basically they didn't want to have the game keep popping up. People searched up Angry Birds 2, Angry Birds Dream Blast, Angry Birds Friends and Angry Birds Reloaded. There's loads of different Angry Birds games. But they also made games that weren't based on Angry Birds. So if you go down here, you also find Darkfire Heroes, Small Town Murders, and Sugar Blast. Well, for those you don't know, Sega has offered $1 billion to acquire Rovio Entertainment, which is about 900 million euros. Now, this is obviously a lot more money than what Playtika, who's an Israeli-based game developer and publisher, offered Rovio last year, which was about $850 million, which I can't be asked to try and work that out as euros. But just know that Rovio is a Finland-based company in Helsinki, so they are going to obviously take the deal which is worth more in euros. And logically, any company would take the deal which is worth more. So, yeah. Now, for those who don't know, Sega was not actually real, to be honest. No one actually really knew Sega was involved in this conversation. People didn't really talk about it. But let me explain something, right? This deal makes so much logical sense for Sega and Rovio, it's not even funny. Now, for those you don't know, I'm going to go through a little bit of Sega's history with acquisitions here. So if you don't know and you're not interested, just skip ahead. You might find it later on in the video. But I will say, Sega's done this a lot before. For those you know, after Sega kind of lost the console wars in the 90s, they moved into just being a third-party game publisher. Now, in the late 90s, early 2000s, PC gaming was on the rise, thanks to thanks to platforms like Steam launching in 2004. Now, the PC market is still very popular today. It still brings in tons of revenue for game publishers, and Sega saw that. And in 2005, they bought two different game publishers: Sports Interactive, who makes Football Manager, and they bought Creative Assembly, who made the Total War games. Now, those two might not seem like major acquisitions today, but at the time, that was Sega pushing into the PC space when console and PC games weren't always the same and weren't always released across the same platform. Because a lot of games that were released on like microcomputers in the years like the Commodore 64 or ZX Spectrum weren't ported to the Master System or Mega Drive or Super Nintendo or anything like that. So it made a lot of sense. And Sega kept growing over the years. People know that Sega was bought by Sammy Corporation in 2004 and formed Sega Sammy Holdings. So people had issues with that. But then obviously they started growing again. In 2009, they bought Atlas, who, in my opinion, is their best acquisition. Because games like Persona have blown up. Everyone knows Persona. Everyone loves it. Even if you're an Xbox fan, you've played Persona now because they've released on my Xbox. So yeah. And then they kept doing some small little acquisitions over time. They got Amplitude Studios in 2013. They got Relic Entertainment in 2016 when its parent company THQ Nordic went bust. And then they got 2 Point Hospital in 2009, not 2019. 2 Point Studios, who made 2 Point Hospital and 2 Point Campus, was acquired by Sega. And yeah, those acquisitions have expanded Sega's market in the console and PC space over the last, I'd say, about 20 years roughly. Now, why is this relevant to this today? Well, Rovio is a mobile game publisher, right? That's the key thing here. Rovio was not big on consoles. They've never been big on consoles. They released the Angry Birds trilogy back in like 2012 on consoles, but besides that, they've never really made console games. And Sega has struggled with mobile games because besides a few Sonic the Hedgehog games and a few like classic games they've thrown up on the app stores and Football Manager, Sega's not a major player in mobile gaming. And people will say, well, Rovio's not a major player in mobile gaming. That is true. But what you got to realise is when it comes to mobile gaming now, especially, the biggest names in mobile gaming are few and far between when it comes to who can be acquired. King was bought by Activision Blizzard in 2016, and their parent company, Activision Blizzard, is in the process of being acquired by Microsoft. Zynga was bought in 2022 by Take-Two Interactive for $12.7 billion. Scope Play, another big mobile game publisher, was just bought by the Savvy Game Group, which is owned by the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund, for $4.9 billion. You know, EA snatched up a bunch of mobile game studios like Glue Mobile. They're gone, they're out of the picture. They're not on the market anymore. And it's quite funny. Sobo, who made Subway Surfers, it was bought by Miniclip, who is owned by Tencent. Supercell's owned by Tencent. So a lot of the major names in mobile gaming are already owned by huge conglomerates now. Rovio was one of the small, I'll say small, they're one of the few ones with a well-known mobile game, like Angry Birds, that's still on the market. So Sega trying to grab Angry Birds whilst they can is logical, And when obviously you've realised that Israel-owned Playtika pulled out of the bidding, that was just sort of the signal for Sega to jump in and try and grab Rovio, because Angry Birds, I know it's not as big as it once was, it's still a well-known IP, still a well-known brand, and it would also help double Sega's market share in mobile, when you think about it, because sure, Angry Birds isn't really huge anymore, but Rovio has got some talented teams. They have made some decent games even in the past. They've made a few decent games now. They're not as good as they once were, But I'm sure Sega is looking at this as like, well, we need a bigger stake in mobile. We need bigger share of the mobile market. Let's buy this company for $1 billion. Now, people always say, well, where did Sega get $1 billion from? The company who owns Sega is worth about $700 billion. People say, that's from pachinko machines. That is true. A lot of Sega Samsung Holdings revenue comes from pachinko machines. But that doesn't change the fact that Sega can easily afford this deal, and well, they don't really need to pay off right now. They can have it pay off over time, because I'm sure they're going to merchandise Angry Birds. I'm sure they're going to do stuff with the other IPs that Rovio own. They're not really worried about the financial capability of this company yet, because they haven't acquired it yet, and well, they need to go through what Rovio owns, what Rovio has in its portfolio, and then they can obviously push those games out on app stores again, because a lot of Rovio's best well-known games, like the original Angry Birds Space, and other games that they made during the 2000s and early 2010s, like Amazing Alex, aren't available mobile anymore due to outdated engines that obviously need to be updated for modern systems. Now, why is this surprising people? People don't need to understand that Sega has always done this. Sega has always tried to slowly move into new markets when it comes to gaming, and it's quite simple why. Because they lost the console war, and we're no longer in the era where the best-selling games on those platforms are always made by the first-party studios. Some of the best-selling games on consoles annually are made by third-party developers, and Sega just needs to expand into mobile more, because their market in mobile, no one talks about them. No one talks about Sonic Dash. No one talks about Sonic Jump. They're not huge in mobile, and mobile's one of the biggest gaming segments by revenue annually for many companies. So for Sega, Rovio seems like a bargain, because sure, they might have declining profits now, but Sega could come in, they could revitalize the brand, and Sega's got a lot of good PR at the minute. Sega, released a free game for April Fool's Day. Who Killed Sonic the Hedgehog? They've also listened to the fans. People like Xbox fans asked Sega, hey, can we have Atlas games on Xbox? They provided the Persona games. Sega also seems to be really fond of re-releasing some of their old games, especially Mega Drive games, which can you release some for more. Like Sonic Origins Plus, for example, is a thing. And they've just added a bunch of Game Gear games to it, which is huge. That's what I'm saying. Like, Sega seems to have a lot more good PR than a lot of their competition, and Rovio having a terrible track record and terrible PR by delisting Angry Birds and whatnot. Sega can easily come in and fix that and use its money and its knowledge to make sure it doesn't happen again, and rebuild Rovio as a brand, and just increase their stake in mobile. Anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts about this in the comments down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you like this idea? Do you not like this idea? Do you think Sega is good for Rovio? Do you think Sega is bad for Rovio? Do you think Rovio is bad for Sega? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I'm Beneath I'm signing out. Peace.